her.
Welcome to the show. This is a special #1extra talks as part of the BBC's Hear Her season. My name is Reece Parkinson.
And I'm Yasmin Evans. And tonight we'll be just discussing all things feminism. And we are asking plenty of questions, but the main one being, should we all be feminists?
And we'll also be finding out about our special guest panellists who are redefining feminism and promoting equality in their own game-changing ways.
We've got a lot of panellists, haven't we? And also a studio audience, if you could just make some noise, please. Don't be shy. Do not be shy. And obviously we are asking you to get involved. As always, give us a text 88811 or @1extra on Twitter.
Yeah, please do. And over the next hour, we'll be discussing what the future of feminism might look like. And we would love to hear your input. Obviously, we have an amazing audience and amazing listeners as well. So if you're a listener who's listening at home, in the car, wherever you're listening, we always like to start the show, One Extra Talks off, by asking you some questions. So do you consider yourself a feminist male or female? What does feminism mean to you? And do we need feminism? Do you feel like we need feminism? Give us a text 88811 or a tweet as well at 1XTRA. That would be amazing.
We should introduce our panellists, shouldn't we, Reece?
We should, and we are going to start off with
Nathaniel.
you guys. Yeah. Nathaniel Cole is a volunteer for the Great Men Project. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You good?
Yes, Cam. I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Amazing.
Always a pleasure.
Never a chore.
Never a chore, that's our phrase, yeah.
And we also have on the show someone that I knew her middle name, and I'm so proud that I know your middle name.
You did, actually.
Anna Velio White. And I feel like I said that right.
Perfect pronunciation.
Thank you. Who done an amazing job. Is the founder of Sister Support Work, who successfully ended harassment outside a London abortion clinic.
Now over here we have Carla Marie Williams. Hey girl. Multi-platinum award singer-songwriter, written for Beyonce. I feel like you've probably heard us screaming that because we got to shout you and big you up. You know what I mean? You're for Beyonce, girl. And obviously, no stranger to the show, no stranger to One Extra. We have the SLUMFLOWER, aka Chidera.
Thanks for having me.
Oh,
you know how it is.
All right, so we really should get this whole thing up and running.
Can I just say as well, my mum adores this woman. Like,
your mum is a big SLUMFLOWER fan.
She's a huge fan. Can we make some noise for our panels, please?
Make a noise for a lot of people. Right, so Nathaniel, I'm going to come to you first. Not to put any pressure on you, but obviously you are the only male. Obviously, we've got Reece over here as our host, but you're the only male panelist that we have here. And I want to ask you, do you consider yourself a feminist?
It's an interesting one. I've never outright said, "Oh, I'm a feminist," because that's just the word. Like in certain things, I think me by default being a good person makes me a feminist. I'm raised by all the women in my family. I'm empathetic towards women, so for me, it's just by good actions that it happens naturally that I've looked at feminism what it is, and it just makes sense to me. So if you want me to say yes, then I can, but I'm just a good person. It's
something that I actually relate to. We had this conversation, didn't we? That I'm constantly asked if I'm a feminist, and I've never just outright said it. Not that I don't feel uncomfortable by it at all. I think in certain situations, I feel like people are asking me because it's to dictate how they would respond or how they should act around me. Which I feel like maybe some of us can relate to. How about you, Sunfire?
Totally, I get that question all the time, and I feel like it's a charged question. People often want a certain reaction from you when they ask that question, rather than them just being like, what do you stand for? What do you care about? What are your views on this particular thing? Because they obviously ask that question with a preconceived idea of what feminism is, and they want you to subscribe to that.
Or no understanding of what feminism is.
Yeah.
People usually think feminists are just raging women who just hate men. They don't understand that feminism is about equality.
So essentially it's changed for you over time.
In terms of what?
In terms of, like you said, most people, would it be more back in the day that would feel like feminism is against men?
No, I still think there's a lot of, especially males, that they think that I hate men. They feel like that I just hate men. It's like, it's got nothing to do with hating men. I love men. I just want equality for women, especially in the workplace. And I don't see myself as a total feminist. I'm a new feminist. And that's the title I put on myself, because I come from quite a traditional Caribbean background, and my mum would always serve the guy first in the house. And with that kind of installation within me, there's certain traditions that I still do. Not so I'll serve the guy first, but just, you know, cooking, like I feel like in the home there are certain roles that women and men play.
So you feel like you want to subscribe to those roles?
I feel like as a new feminist, yes, I feel like that certain things need to stay. If I want my tyres changed and my car washed, I definitely need my dude to do that for me.
And yeah, how about you, Anna?
Yeah,
How would you term?
I think it's an interesting one because I think people are quite scared of the word feminist, and I think especially guys. And I think we kind of need to rebrand it slightly just as equality, because that's what it is. And until women have equal pay and until we have control over our bodies, then there's no equality. So I think if we kind of positioned it more like that and less about women versus men, I think we'd get a lot more people on board.
The thing is, I don't see why women shouldn't have disdain or, you know, angst or anger towards men, because, you know, in a world where women are unsafe because of men, and in a world where men benefit off that lack of safety, then if you're angry at men or if you hate men, then that's excusable, because those people, that particular group of people, continue to be oppressive and don't see their behavior as, you know, harmful enough to want to change it by themselves. Like the fact that we have to create feminism to be like, hey man, we're people. So that frustration, I believe, is so justified. So, but I don't really believe feminism should be solely about, you know, I hate men. It should actually be a progressive conversation that can create a structure we can work around. But for those, you know, women who do say, you know what, I do hate men, then I hear them and I respect why and I understand why.
Yeah. And remember, it was a show a while back when you was on One Extra Talks as well. And we always seem to have a lot of men that will then text back to what you said now, saying, well, you're saying it's all of us, but it's not all of us. Are you empathetic towards where they come from, or do you feel like they just don't?
I absolutely am, but the thing is, we have to ensure that we address the main cohort. We can't just be like, oh, there are good ones, therefore we're going to completely, you know, just ignore the ones that are the majority of the problem, just focus on the good ones, because we're not going to get anywhere if we do that. And sadly, the good ones are outnumbered by the ones that are problematic. So we can't just be like, there are good ones. And also, being a good man isn't something that should be rewarded. You should be nice. You should be kind. You should respect women. You shouldn't receive a trophy for choosing to see a woman as a human being. So the guys that are like, but I'm a good guy, well, this isn't about you, because if you're a good guy, you just focus on being a good guy, and if you really want to be a really great guy, you would hold other guys accountable.
No, obviously, there's a lot of clicks. Yes, we are here with a live audience, and now I will say from my point of view, I'm speaking as I label myself as a woman. Obviously, a few of you maybe in the audience, maybe on the panel, maybe even listening, obviously 8811, that might not label yourself as a female, like as a woman. That's not what you put out there. Now, after hearing what this panelist has to say, are there any men in the audience that want to say, look, oh, there we go. We got someone over there.
We got a brother.
Could you introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Evening, everyone.
Hi.
So it's like amongst feminist discourse themselves, there's not enough of a consensus as to whether men can identify as such. So like brother said, like if you're just a good person and decent towards women, then that's kind of the only label I can take, because I don't want to position myself as an obstacle. I've seen women say like men can't be feminists, and if you identify as such, then you're part of the problem. So I can't position myself in some self-righteous manner to say, yeah, I'm a feminist and I'm fighting for you, where women themselves are telling me you can't do that. So until there's like some kind of consensus, and that's not really a conversation for me. So whenever you have that conversation, get back to me. And then, like,
noted.
But until then,
no, that makes a lot of sense.
But until then, I can't.
I get where he's coming from.
Until then, I can't really say I'm a feminist, because I don't want to position myself be that. I want to be a decent person, but then that's really being kind of undecent, and that's
completely hear you.
Because some women are saying to me, "Don't do it," so I've got to listen to them.
Completely
Carla,
hear you.
Were you saying something just then about that?
I was actually saying that I've never heard anybody say that a man can't be a feminist. I've heard the total opposite, that basically anyone can be a feminist. As long as you believe in equality, you're a feminist. That's what I've heard.
Do you know what it is? I think the reason why there are women who say to men, you can't take on that label, is because I've seen and I've come across personally quite a few men who will self-identify as feminists and put it in their bio on their social media, right? And part of the reason why they do that is because they're using it as like a signal of like, hey, I'm a good man. I know all the feminist language. I'm going to reel you in and like, you know, pretend that I stand for all the values that you care about. And then eventually my actions are going to trip me up. And then I'm going to gaslight you into believing that I'm a great guy, when really I'm still using all the oppressive behaviours that I have, but I'm just using them in a twisted way. So I believe that
but
men can
do that.
but then the power dynamics are different. Do you get what I mean? So like women can be disrespectful to men, and women can, you know, be manipulative, but then it means that I feel that there is less harm created in the long run in terms of how both genders are affected by this. So if you look at the way...
I disagree.
What do you think?
I feel like we're in an era now where both women and men are basically pioneering being a feminist because it's trendy, right? But what is being a feminist? And are people really just putting it in their bios to look good? And that's what I think women as well are being just as damaging, saying that they're feminists and ain't actually really taking any action to actually...
What do you think makes an effective feminist?
Or what makes an effective feminist? More than putting it in your bio, more than putting out a tweet a day complaining about men, like how can we make actions for actual having equality? What things are we actually doing to take action? That makes me personally, someone a feminist.
There is that problem of things becoming meme culture.
Yeah.
Nathaniel, the boys that you work with, have you ever had any conversations with them?
So I volunteer for a charity called Great Initiative. We go into schools and do workshops with boys that are in year 8 and above. We do an initial workshop where we introduce what being a man is to them. So we just open up the conversation for them. We ask them to think about what it is to be a man, and the workshops are participant-led, so they do the work, essentially. We just guide them. I'm not going to go and tell a boy that he's wrong, because who am I to do that? Really what we try and get to is for them to identify traditional gender stereotypes that exist, and the positive and negative connotations of those stereotypes. So for the boys, and when they turn into men, it's about they don't have emotional intelligence, they think they have to be the providers and the breadwinners, and there's a certain amount of anger that can come with that. And then how they then affect and reach out to others is a result of that. So with men not being emotionally intelligent and not having that understanding of themselves inwardly is why you get things like high chance of male suicide, domestic violence towards women. So we try and open up those conversations for them so they understand what's happening to them and why they've been brought up in this sort of society. We then visit them 6 more times throughout the next 2 years, where we talk about masculinity, violence, pornography, consent, and a few other subjects, just to give them an understanding of what their manhood is. And then they make their own posters that they put around school of what they think manhood is.
So you think at an early age as well, that's when you need to start...
Oh yeah, I wish I had that.
Yeah,
I wish I had that.
SLUMFLOWER, I want to go back to one that you were saying, because we got a text in, 8811 if you tuned into the show. We're talking about the future of feminism tonight. So the text says, from 878, it says, I've always been a male feminist because I've got 2 daughters. But I do think women get away with too much. It's not fair.
There's so much to unpack here. Right, let's start with the daughters. So the problem that women often face when interacting with men who do the whole I think women are people thing is that you shouldn't have to wait until you have daughters in order to see women as full autonomous beings. So the fact that, because I feel like that statement would have gone so well regardless of him mentioning his daughters or not, because it's not about having ownership over women. It's about being like, you know what, I believe women are people, they deserve to be autonomous, and that whether they are my daughters or whether they are my co-workers, whether they're someone I've just met in the street, it shouldn't change the amount of respect I have for them. What was the second half of his point? I can't remember.
Women get away with too much, it's not fair.
Okay, sir. So the problem about this whole it's not fair, women get away with too much, is that, again, we're not considering power dynamics in this conversation. So in order for us to have a conversation that will have larger context, we need to understand that men in society hold a lot more power than women. So it means that men have been socialized to get away with a lot more than women get away with. If you look at how we were raised as kids, boys get to be messy, they get to make mistakes, and they get to have it brushed off as boys will be boys. But then girls from very early on are held accountable for their actions, and we grew up with that conditioning. So for men to feel like, oh, it's not fair that women get away with stuff, but then it's like, well, men get to get away with so many things, including abuse, including sexual assault. If we look at the statistics of, when people actually go and report sexual assault and how many of those cases actually end up being that someone actually goes to jail, it's so small. So it means that society wavers so many things when it comes to men, but with women, we're policed for every single thing. We're not allowed to be too angry. We can't be too passionate. You can't be too bossy. You can't show too much. But then if you cover up too much, then you're a bit of a prude. But then if you show too much, then, you know, you're asking for it. We're constantly being policed. We're never enough. There's never a right way to be a woman. So for this man to feel like, you know, he's walking on eggshells, he just hasn't assessed his environment enough.
Can I ask the audience a question? Do conversations like this push men and women apart as well? That's one of the questions at the front here. We'll get a microphone to you, don't worry.
Yeah, there we go.
And please introduce yourself. We want to know who you are, girl.
My name is Naomi Bellu. I actually have a podcast called Pretty Girl Problems.
Plug that, girl.
Explores, it explores the essence of the inner and outer woman. And for me, I see great power in communication and storytelling. I feel like for me, feminism is about vocalizing your reality, and that's how we kind of come together. So in answering your question, I absolutely feel like the more we discuss and explore our realities and share our experiences, the more we empower each other. I think the problem that I have with feminism is that people are very judgmental, whether it's men looking at women or women looking at women in certain ways. Do you know what? With the last comment that came through, there's an element where I feel like, yeah, I understand why he might feel like women get away with a lot, because we have more of a freedom in expressing our realities. But in the same breath, like SLUMFLOWER just said, in the real world, in society, in the workplace, even within the home, like, men hold all the cards. So I feel like we should absolutely be granted the freedom to express our realities.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There's just someone behind you that had something to say as well.
Yeah, so...
Just introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm Ree.
Hi, Ree.
25 Lucian.
Rebecca.
Yeah, sorry, I have to big up like Lila Ball because she asked me to do it. So hey, Jessie, she's tuned in. I would say I think it's very. I have like male friends and female friends, and I'd say the amount is pretty equal between like both genders. And okay, that's a bit tricky. Let me not say genders. I've got male and female friends. Let me leave that gender word away. And I think you need to discuss it, and it doesn't bring you guys apart. I think it's actually several occasions it's brought us together because it brings knowledge and understanding in the best form, because it's the truest form. You're just discussing things, and I've had guys say, well, you know, like things that they thought women, like he said, have got away with, and then we're like, no, because this, and then they're like, oh, but this, and we're like, no, because in reality, like you said as well, Naomi, it's this way. So, and then they're like, raw. So if you don't have those conversations,
they're not gonna know.
then you're just gonna go through life, and then you're gonna have really misogynistic views towards women, and just feel like, yeah, well, they get away with it, and this, so I'm gonna be that man, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna think this way. Because you need to be told by a woman, because you can't be told. I don't think you can be told by another man, because they don't understand it. They don't live that, so they don't. Yeah, they don't get it.
Right.
But to be fair, going back to this text, not to stick up to him, play devil's advocate, like, not sticking up for him. But when he said going too far, like an example would be when you sign on Twitter and the first thing you see is #menartrash. Maybe for a lot of guys. Maybe for a lot of guys, but a lot of guys might see that and be like, well, how are we trash? Yeah. So does anyone in the audience feel like, does anyone tweet that maybe yourselves?
Just a lady there.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh, and the microphone matches your trousers. Oh, listeners can't see, but for us it's visually pleasing.
So my name's Natalie, and I'm a co-host of a podcast called World, actually, Podcasting World.
Hands up if you have a podcast. Okay, two of you, cool.
Okay, I see you.
Just connecting people.
I think when we say things like men are trash, really what that is getting down to, I don't personally tweet that or really say it in my day-to-day, but it's really getting down to the fact that the patriarchy is trash, right? And by men allowing certain behaviors to continue, that's why we say it's trash. Like, it's not about you as an individual. You're taking it really personal. It's about the power structure you exist within, and that's why we're addressing it to say, like, the way men behave is trash. We say it that way because, yeah, it is visceral, it gets a reaction, but it is for you to pay attention. It's not for women to always make you feel comfortable. And so if that term makes you feel uncomfortable, I feel that men need to often address
Change
their
your
behavior,
yeah,
rather than just the vocabulary, because at the end of the day, if it's not a fact, prove it, right? Don't just say, oh, men not trash. You get what I'm saying?
Nathaniel, can I ask you?
There's two things. So
yeah, there's two things.
before I address that point, the point about the guy and having daughters and then suddenly realising
Women are people.
women are people. So, unfortunately for men, like, you can go through a long period of your life without having intimate and close interaction with women until you ask your partner, if they're a woman, what they go through on a day-to-day basis in terms of sexual harassment, catcalling and all that sorts of things. You won't really know. Like, you might have grown up and seen people do things and everything, but when a woman actually tells you every day, I think about how I dress, what I say to people, and like the self-policing they go through, until someone actually tells you that, you might not know. So then when it comes to them having daughters and suddenly realising I think there's an opportunity for them to learn and change, and that's okay if they're willing to do that. With his text, it's problematic because he says, "Oh, I've got my daughters, I love them, but women get away with too much." So he's still got learning to do if he wants to, and that'll probably come later as his daughters probably get older. And back to men are trash. I've said that myself. I've written it in blogs.
My G.
But that's just because I understand where it comes from, and I know it's not me attacking all men and all the good men I know and all the people that are doing good work. I know it's a collective thing, and it's for us to look like within ourselves about what we can do to be better. Like, the problem people have with equality is that, and particularly men in terms of feminism, gender equality, is that for everyone to be equal now, me as a man, I have to miss out on something. I have to give back.
It's equity.
And people don't want to do that. Yeah. So for me, I'm happy to open the door. No, it's not physically a door, but open doors and open doors and give opportunities to people that are more marginalised than me. But other people, they don't want to do that, and that's for them. They have to learn. And me as a man, I have to talk to them and get it across to them. It's not women's job to do that either.
Indeed.
By the way, you're listening to BBC Radio 1 Extra, and we are live on Facebook as well. So hello, Facebook, if you're watching. We're streaming live. You made, when we was chatting on Thursday, though, you made a really good point about the men are trash thing. So if you can remember that, I feel
yes,
like
I did, Reece. The men are trash hashtag, be it. I'm gonna call it that. I think, like before, you were saying, Ree, that it's just a joke. Where it originated from actually was a hashtag that ran on Twitter quite some time ago, and it was actually based on straight relationships and man and female relationship, and it was a hashtag that was put out there on social media for women who were married to their partners who felt like they were very restricted in relationships, controlled, and it was a platform to put how they feel out there about their relationships, for it being very negative situations. Here's my thing, is that starts like that, and then it goes through, and then we get to the point where it's like, oh, it's a joke now. That's what I have a problem with many different things, in terms of, for example, Me Too. We forget, when people say hashtag Me Too, most people, I feel like, this is my own opinion, you'll instantly think Hollywood. You did not know that this was made by a black woman. This was created by a black woman. And this is the problem that I have with hashtags and things like that, and those phrases, along with many other things, but that's my main issue. Now we have such a powerful phrase that gets watered down. And what are we going to do to not dilute that? What's our choice? Because it's our choice to stop that from happening. So I just wondered if anyone has any opinions.
I think with the hashtag, because for me personally, I don't like the phrase. I feel like it's more provocative than it's informative. So what we need to do, because I still believe in the sentiment of it, but I think what needs to happen is that the conversation needs to continuously be had. So with me personally, as much as I don't use the phrase, I still make sure to put out that sentiment out there. So I'm constantly having that conversation about why men create oppressive behavior and why men choose to reinforce a system that harms women, and they don't see it as enough of an emergency to change their behavior. That's essentially what men are trash means. So instead of using that phrase, because when you use a phrase like that, it's very inflammatory, so people get really, really like, oh, you said what? But then if you actually are, breaking it down, explaining why it's that way, then people they'll still be, really, really feeling attacked, and they will still feel the need to be defensive, but it creates room for other people to learn. Because if you say something that's such a short sentence like men are trash, full stop, why? Where does this come from? Who are they trash to? What can we do to reduce the trashness? Because we can't completely obliterate it until we actually obliterate the system, and that's not going to happen in our lifetime. But we can work with the people that are around us.
No, definitely. I want to ask you, Anna, as well, with your projects that you did. Was you working with men on them projects? And if so, how was that?
I mean, we didn't work with men as much as we would like, and I think this is a huge part of the problem. It comes down to empathy. So we basically got the first ever buffer zone in the UK, and a buffer zone is a piece of legislation that means no one can stand near an abortion clinic, you can't approach anyone, you can't try and stop them from going in. And we had a lot of women on board, and that was amazing because I think people can empathise with that situation. But then when you get to a point when you're trying to change policy, what you're speaking to is quite elderly white men who basically are under the impression that if anyone's pregnant and they don't want to have the child, it's because they're some kind of like girl about town who doesn't think about her actions. I mean, like quite a lot of people, a majority, are already mothers. They're just making the best decision for their family, or they've suffered an assault. It's not a viable fetus. They have no understanding of why people are going to that place. And you know, we had an appeal on the PSPO this week, and we had 2 judges, and both of them were old white men, and they, of course, completely missed the whole point of why we needed this legislation, because there's no protection for those women under the harassment law, because under harassment law, it needs to happen to you more than once. Most people go to the clinic just once, so it doesn't work. And then people just kind of think, well, if they're a little bit distressed, kind of what's the harm? And it's about that lack of empathy and representation as well. So when trying to work with men, you know, it's hard because when you get up to the higher levels, you have to work with men, but really you want to be working with women as well in that situation. So we kind of needed more men on the ground and then more women when we got to the policy stage.
Yes. Yeah, that's a lot. And I think, although we might not be working within the same sort of organisation as you, Anna, but I think a lot of us could probably relate to that in terms of where we are and certain situations being dominated by a male. Carla, I just wanted to ask you about, you know, you're in the music industry, very male dominated, very much so. So what are your experiences? I know you've probably got plenty, but
yeah, so it's really weird because obviously I started my my movement Girls Irate 2 years ago, and the reason why I started that was because I felt outnumbered and very. I felt bullied at times by men when I wanted to basically step out the box of just being a songwriter. I've got bigger aspirations, but I'm still fighting against just get on and write some hits. That's what I hear from a lot of men. So it was about, okay, how can I meet more women who feel like me, who's had that experience, and I want to meet more women and I want to get it all together. But it's really weird because over the last 2 years, I found that more men have been coming forward and actually wanting to collaborate and make that change and make things different.
Why do you think that is?
Hold on, let me just
go on.
this next bit. And I found it really difficult to actually engage with women. And I'm battling now with actually women taking it as serious. I'm finding men are taking it much more serious than women in my industry and fighting for it a lot more than women are. And just going back to the Me Too topic, I must have tweeted something about, and I used the hashtag Me Too, and a woman in the industry said, you wasn't sexually abused by that. That's for women that are sexually abused. And I said, well, no, he was verbally abusive. He told me to shut up. So, and he done it in front of people. He embarrassed me. It was this. And it was a woman who said, well, he's fine with me. So
do you know what that is? That's literally a display of internalized misogyny. And I get exactly what you mean by other women not being on board with what you're trying to do, because you're literally like, hey, let me liberate you. And they're like, no thanks. And it's really frustrating because regardless of whether they actually get involved with what you're doing or not, they're still benefiting off the world that you're contributing to. And it's just really, really tiring. But that's why I have less disappointment towards women, funny enough, because the reason why is that they're internalizing a system created by men because they feel like when they behave like men and when they are liked by men, that for them is some sort of achievement, and it's enough because it offers them a level of safety. Because if we look at how feminists are painted in society, as in women who are radical feminists, you're painted as angry. Everyone tells you that no one wants to be around a feminist, nobody's going to love a feminist, and this is all scaremongering used to silence women. So you're either going to be a raging feminist or you're going to be complicit in your own dehumanization.
But we have to acknowledge as well, like in the music industry, that I feel that all those titles are also titles used by women. And like you said, like they have become programmed to actually think and use these words in the way that men do. I think men...
Of course, because it's a very
called-
competitive industry and women are taught to literally... Like, if we look at how society is built, women compete for love, but you rarely ever see men, you know, trying to compete for love, because men are taught that as long as you're a man, you're enough and someone will love you and come and feed you and change your diaper for you. But if you're a woman, you're taught you must earn it.
But what we got to do is stop making excuses for ourselves. And that's where I'm at with it. I'm like, cool, I get everything you're saying, but right now... it's excuses for ourselves. We are aware of the problems. We are trying to address the problems. So as women, we ourselves need to actually change our attitudes.
Absolutely. And watch how we speak about other women to other women as well.
For sure, for sure.
And Carla, thanks for sharing your story about the music industry. I want to go to the audience now, because I guess it's something that you may have experienced in your workplace, working with men. Has anyone maybe got a story that they'd like to share?
Someone over there? No? No.
Yeah, if anyone's got any story that they'd like to share or maybe experience.
Or maybe even with what the Chidira and Carla were saying with women as well. Let's talk about it. There we go. Everyone put their hand up there. Girl. Hi, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Wise.
Hi, Wise.
I just want to agree with what you were saying. I think there's a level of responsibility that we as women need to start taking, because at the end of the day, before these men, they are boys. They come from us. We birthed them. So we can control how we grow our young boys and what we teach them about being a woman, and how we nurture them. Because yes, we raise our girls, but it's like we just love our boys and we leave them to the world. I think that we need to pay more attention to the men that we choose to be the father of our children. I think that we need to take more responsibility when choosing our partners, because I feel like women go for the wrong type of man and then they leave their child to grow and follow the wrong example, and then those men go out into the world and become trash, but then they came for us. So we need to reel back and start again.
Got one at the front as well, I think.
Oh, is it me?
You have a question? Yeah.
Okay. So I disagree with Wise, only because...
Me too. Sorry.
Yeah, not to be rude or anything, but because it takes a village to raise a child, and I think if the village like that this child grew up in, say this child being a boy, for example, grew up in, and he's coming from a home where his mum's always pumping positive things about women, making sure he respects women, but the world, you go out of your house and the whole world is completely saying the opposite. How is he supposed to then understand, okay, I need to show that respect to everybody outside of my home? Because I know loads of males that are extremely respectful to their mothers and grandmothers and aunties and sisters, but as soon as it becomes outside of that, it's out house, I'll say in-house, great, like they're completely respectful, but when it's out of that house, it's the opposite. So who really needs to do?
Do you know
more?
what it is? I feel like the onus is always on women to have to
do
I
this.
feel because even though I agree with the sentiment of the point that Wise really, really nicely put together, I feel like the problem still is that the man wasn't even mentioned in that conversation. So men also have a responsibility to display the kind of attitude that a young man should emulate. Like, the reason why I feel that a lot of young men are in disarray is because they haven't had, you know, a father figure they can look at and be like, this is how I should behave, because there's only so much a woman can do. And like you were saying about, you know, you can instill all the positivity and all the insights and values into that young man, the world will still respond to him differently. So I feel like we're at a point now where men have to start holding each other accountable. And as in the same way women have gathered to create feminism and have been able to maintain this system, men have to look at each other and be like, we have to create something. We need to create a world that's safer for our young men. We need to start displaying the kind of attitudes that young men deserve to see. And there's only so much women can do, and it's not supposed to be our job to keep fixing everything.
But at the same time, what are women actually prepared to invest into feminism? Because, as I said, I've been doing this thing for 2 years, and I'm a fetus in feminism. And I don't find that many...
When you say invest, what do you mean?
To invest in change. When you think about people that have created change, whether it be like a Malcolm X or a Martin Luther King, or, you know, all these people that... Do you know how long it took people to actually create change?
Do you know what it is?
We have a short time span of things. We get passionate for 5 minutes. Oh, yeah, I want to do this, do 5 little things, and then think that change is going to happen. It's a constant battle. You got to keep going and keep going. And I can tell you, people will jump on a train, ride to one stop, and then they're off. That's not going to create change.
Completely hear you.
And I think women need to get on the train and stay on the journey. Like, it's a long journey.
Do you know what it is? The reason why a lot of women get off the train really early is because of the way society responds to them when they become passionate about it. And I, as a woman who is actually have been on the train for a minute, and a lot of people, especially women, like we were speaking about earlier, about women, you know, not being down for it, have told me that I'm too angry, or that I'm being divisive by calling out divisive behaviour, or that instead of me to be protecting men, I'm busy, you know, airing out their behaviour. Now, the problem with that is that we often, you know, we put the blame on women and we forget to hold the men accountable. But also, in our society, we tend to protect the men instead of us protecting each other first. Like, we have to look at each other first and be like, okay, you know what, you're speaking up and it's risky and it's dangerous, and I might not agree with you, but I'm going to make sure that you're protected and that you're safe. But no one's doing that for women, and that's the problem. So I feel like I do get why women just eventually give up, and just, it's easier to be misogynistic than it is to be a feminist, because it means that you're taking the risk of not being accepted, and you're taking the risk of people telling you that nobody's going to want to be with you.
Sorry, ladies, we've just got a question at the front here.
Hi everyone, my name's Mojo. I don't have a question. I wanted to respond to what you were saying about holding men accountable. I think it's really amazing what you're doing, because I'm a survivor of rape. I've been raped quite a few times throughout my childhood, and then when I was a teenager again. And none of those boys, they all just living their lives like it's golden at the moment. None of them were told off. None of them, I wasn't told to call the police. I didn't know I could. When I was a child, I got abused by a family member, and that family member was just sent back to Nigeria, and it was okay. And then my mum told me off, like, don't tell people that. Why did you do that? Why would you talk? I told someone that wasn't a part of our family, and so that person was protected, but the person that was meant to protect me didn't. When I grew up and I got raped again when I was 13, I tried to tell some girl in my class, and she just gossiped around school that I'd done this with these guys by choice, and that wasn't the case. When I got gang raped when I was 15, I didn't know that it was rape until I was 17, when I told my key worker in my hostel. And I just thought that because I'd never really been taught, like, to hold a man accountable for his actions. Like, you're just meant to get over it and deal with it, and it was your fault. It was my problem. It was my fault. I was there. I opened the deal.
Shouldn't have smiled, you know.
I shouldn't have done this, and I think that there needs to be so much more work done with young men, and what you're doing is absolutely amazing, because I just wish that someone spoke to those young boys about consent. Because if I was to tell you, go into depth with my story, I wasn't beaten, I wasn't punched, no one hit me, no one hurt me. I went to school with these boys. When people were calling me ugly, the boys would be like, oh, you're not ugly, Josephine, man. Oh, you're pretty. So I thought they were my friends. So when they said they're coming to my house, I was like, oh, these are my friends. And they never knew what consent was, and neither did I. So I think that when it comes to feminism, we need to be educating as well as advocating, as well as talking to them, say this is what we want, this is how we want to be treated. Because now, in response to your question about having an experience with men at events and stuff like that, and in the industry, having lived the life that I've lived, I make sure that I educate a man on how to speak to me. I'm gay, so I don't really care. Like, I don't need you to chat me up. You can just get over that part, bro. But I went to a networking event a few months ago, the Wall of Comedy, and it was a great time for me to just network and get to know people. But there was predominantly men there, and on the same day there was a female empowerment event, and, you know, shout out to her, great stuff that she's doing. But I went on in my Instagram and I had a little rant, because I just thought, this doesn't make any sense. There's a female empowerment event going on, and we want empowerment amongst men. So why are you at the event? Why are you not here with me? Why am I the only woman here? Why is it that when I'm talking to a man, like, what do you do? Oh, you run a business, your charity. So what was your plan? How did you go about this? Statistics, all that stuff. They're looking at me like, right, you're actually interested. Like, oh, yeah. I thought you just thought I was nice. You know, and I think as women, we need to go to the men and educate them and do it there. Female empowerment events are great. It's wonderful,
that's
but
the thing.
I don't
Thank you for sharing your story, by the way.
Yeah, Mojo, thank you so much for that
story. Yeah,
thank you.
In terms of my experience with men, although, you know, yeah, they look in and they're seeing a woman, I always experience they know what I'm about. So the way how they interact with me is on the level of, what are we going to do? How are we going to collaborate? How are we going to move forward? And like yourself, when I was young, I remember I first started writing really young, 17, I was in the studio. I went with a really low top on, and the producer I worked with thought it was funny to put his hand down my top as a joke. Yeah, he thought it was really funny. And from that day onwards, I used to go to the studio, lab ratted out, and I became very over how I dressed was very probably, I don't know, people thought I was a lesbian, but I'm not a lesbian. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would cover up. So, and I was very aware of how I carried myself. So I probably went to the other extreme. When that incident happened, obviously it got a bit physical. But now I feel like how I carry myself, the way how, as you said, I've educated the men to talk to me, yo, respect me. What are we doing? Because you know, if you're coming to talk to me, it's about something. Not this yet, anyway.
Carla, thanks for sharing your story. Mojo, thank you. That's super brave. And your Instagram videos are amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
We're going to move on in a second, but we did have one more question. I saw a hand. I think it was you. Yeah, go on.
Sorry. So I think it's great that, and it's important that in feminism, both men and women have their place within the movement. But what I think is sad is when the emphasis is always put on the woman to do the work. Like, educating people about feminism is great if you're equipped to do it, but some women, it's just hard enough to exist in this world and be safe. So it's not everyone's job. Sometimes as a man, the same way that I can look at somebody on the street and see an experience and understand that it's cruel or it's not the right thing to do, you can as well. I don't feel that men always need to have a hand given to them to understand what is right and what is wrong. You just need to challenge yourself. And I just think the duty shouldn't be always on women, that you have to step up and make sure you behave well and so on and so forth. Because if you think about it, women are already coming at a limited place when it comes in terms of power. So when you speak of like women and doing the work to make sure that women are treated fairly within the industry, you have to remember that for men it's kind of like standing up at the table, which is still an action and is great and necessary, but as for a woman, it's kind of like you have to push the table, you have to really shake it to even make sure, and that's like a destabilization. So I think you have to show a little bit of compassion for women when they are maybe not being so cooperative, because it's like they're already starting on the back foot. They're already 5 steps behind, whereas so they have to like run to meet you.
Babe,
whereas
everything that you guys say to me, I understand. Remember, I'm a woman and a black woman. And I'm a small black woman, so all the
mighty
odds,
presence,
all the odds are against me. So I understand that, like everything, like you're talking to the converted here. Like I'm like gonna go every obstacle. The industry's run by predominantly older white men. Like so. Everything you're saying, but for me, and just coming from my background, single parent, mum, you know, dad left when I was 8, stereotypical mum, had 3 jobs, like 2 kids, you know, like I get that, but for me, I'm just like, yo, like if you want to be about something and you want to create change and you want to create the future of feminism, we have to stand up first. I see them men and I go, what can you do for me? What can you do for me? What can you do for me? Cool, let's keep it moving because this is what we're doing. Jump on the train. And that's how I see it. Like, I don't even think about educating them until they disrespect me.
I agree with you about
sorry.
I was going to say, I agree with you about not having to educate men, because I feel that in 2018, men have more access to resources than they think. If you can access your favorite social media platform, if you can find, you know, this obscure website to order your favorite football kit, then you can also have access to information that will educate you. You also follow loads of women on the internet as well. So there are so many women speaking, but no one's listening. Men aren't listening to women, so it's not even about educating them because they're still not going to listen. So they have the choice to listen, but they choose not to, and that's the problem. So I feel like I've given up on the whole educating. I feel like my foot is on my neck, right? And I'm screaming, and then everyone's telling me, you know, your screaming is kind of hurting my ears. So what I'm not going to do while your foot is on my neck is be like, excuse me, did you know that the longer you... I'm not doing that. I'm going to be like, get your foot off my neck. And I don't care how aggressive my response looks. You cannot tell a person how to respond to pain. No, you can't do that.
And you know what, Carla, you mentioned obviously being a black woman, and that's where I want to move the conversation on to now, because we want to go into I want to go into intersectional feminism. Okay. Now, I want to start with you, SLUMFLOWER, on this. So obviously this is feminism, but broken down into race and not gender, but identity. Yeah.
Let's go into ageism as well.
Of course. Which comes into it as well, yeah. So for you, SLUMFLOWER, do you feel like there's a big difference in the breakdown of feminism? Because I guess a lot of people might think feminism, middle class, white woman, but really it then breaks down, and that group might not identify or kind of be able to understand what that other marginalised group is going through.
So the term intersectional feminism was coined by a woman called Kimberly Crenshaw, I believe. And essentially, she was trying to put forth a message that even if you are a black woman, of course you're oppressed, and even if you're straight as well, you still have to consider that there are groups of people, for example, who don't identify as straight, who still go through issues, and that we have to make sure that if you're in a position of power, you must prioritize those who have less power than you. And this especially revolves around, the topic of trans women. We have to, if everybody in this room has a responsibility, we have to look out for trans women. We have to, because nobody else will. And the average lifespan of a trans woman is 35 years old, which is terrible, and that's unfair. And so the whole point of intersectional feminism is to include as many people in the conversation as possible, but also to be aware that various facets of your identity cross over. So like how you were saying that you're not just black and you're not just a woman, you're both. And making sure that you're allowed and you're welcomed into that conversation regardless of where you're starting from. But with intersectional feminism comes, the understanding of layers and understanding how power works. So me as a straight black woman, I'm a black woman, so of course I'm oppressed by, whiteness, but then I'm straight. So it means that I'm not going to get a rock thrown at my head if I'm seen kissing a guy, because that's what society wants me to do. It means that I have access to so many resources and I have a fair footing in society because, society already views me as doing the right thing. But then if I were to be, if I wasn't straight, then it means that I have to be a lot more careful and I have to be protected a lot more. So it means that where you have power, recognize it and try your best to use it. But also it means as well that in any movement, we must prioritize those who are the most marginalized for it to be effective. Because the thing with white feminism is that it starts from the top. So they're like, armpit hair and like wage gap, and those are important, don't get me wrong, but if we then make it okay to have armpit hair and then we even out the wage gap, there are still kids that are as young as 9 in East Africa who are getting married off to old men. Female circumcision is still happening. Women are dying at the hands of their husbands in Nigeria. So we're not actually really addressing the issue properly here, because even if in Nigeria the gender wage gap is evened out, you're still going to be, confined to being in the kitchen, because remember that you're not allowed, or when the men are discussing their banter in the living room, you're not allowed to come and, contribute to the conversation because you're a woman. So it means that we must start from the very, very, very bottom in order for this to be effective. What can we do to make society safer for the person who's the most unsafe? And then once that person has an increase in safety, everybody else above in terms of their levels of power will benefit automatically.
Chidera, do you think, this is, I'm going to ask you, Anna, if you don't mind, but I'm just going to speak from my point of view as well, is that I'm mixed race. I identify as a mixed race person because I feel like it's not my duty to. I'm just not, I'm not unaware that I have a privilege as a mixed race woman. I do, and I understand that. Do you feel like, Anna, it's important for every individual to understand what they represent?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a huge problem with intersectionality, because when the Formula One kind of banned the girls in the skimpy outfits, I thought I knew where I stood in that. I was like, absolutely great. And then heard an interview with Naomi Campbell. She was like, we've got to understand is there are people who come from very, very working class families and there's no other way out of this poverty. But if you're attractive, kind of, this is a way that you can get out. And that was kind of my privilege slightly blinding me. And I was thinking about it and I was like, you know what we need to do is like not just ban it, but also make sure there's opportunities for those people. And I think feminism right now is very much, it is, I think to be a feminist is quite a privilege, because and people kind of hold people accountable for things that they shouldn't, because it's like, don't take that job, that guy's really rude, or don't do this, don't behave in this way. But some people don't have a choice and people don't always recognise that. And I think, you need to recognise where you stand and then recognise, like you said, people who don't have as much power as you, and kind of bring that into it. So if everyone kind of knows where they stand in the scale and then how they can kind of move people up, I think that's a huge thing we can do with intersectionality.
What I like over the last few years is I've been asked to be on a number of boards, and the reason why is because obviously I tick boxes. I'm a woman and I'm a black woman, and the majority of the boards are white men, and now obviously there's white women on it, but there's no women of colour in any type of way. It allows me to address the hierarchies that actually happen within that. So for me, one thing that I have to always identify when I'm sitting in these rooms that even though myself and another white lady, we are fighting for equality of women, that I am at the disadvantage. If we can't have that conversation, then we can't sit on a board together. So for me,
equity.
Yeah. So for me, I always have to push that conversation before I get into business with anybody that I work with, anybody that supports me in what I'm doing. If we can't do that, then it's a problem.
Yeah. We've got just to make everyone aware, we have 10 minutes left of the show, and we could talk forever about this. I feel like we need to, but the whole point of us being here today is that we are adding to the conversation. We're not starting a conversation and we're not ending it. We're adding to it. So keep the texts coming in on 8811. We have someone that in the audience.
Hey, I'm Talia Jordan.
Hi, Talia.
I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, I'm listening to everyone having their piece to say, and it's amazing. Listen to the arguments and debates. But we were talking originally about just feminism as it is. And I'm like, wow, this is deep. And then we went into a deeper side and thinking about everyone else. And how do I do that? How do I think about other people? Is it selfish that as a black female that I just want to think about black feminist problems rather than looking at someone who might identify as queer, who is trans? Is that selfish of me to just want to think about my problems, or is it, or can I sort of justify it? And then if I'm just going to think about myself. And what if I have a quiet voice? What if I am not as talkative? I'm a very talkative person. But for other people, what if they can't sit on a panel and discuss? Sometimes your vocabulary doesn't... Before I didn't have the vocab to say certain things. I think something and I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. I can't phrase that. What about that person that can't do that, that might not send a tweet and send it to the masses? How do we address them and how do we get their opinions across?
We've got a question actually that was a part of this discussion, and it was, how do you get the courage to start using your voice, which I feel like is... You've started it for us, so thank you. Now, I want to actually throw your... sorry, I don't want to take over your question, but if I can throw it out to the audience, I know there's a couple of people that want to answer your question rather us than hogging. Thank you.
Am I going first?
You go.
Hi, my name is Christina. I think sometimes it's hard to kind of do this and have a voice. Like, for example, myself, I'm not a person who speaks out a lot about things, but I'm a person very much of action. I have an agency that is for inclusivity in the industry, and we very much support SLUMFLOWER. We very much support a lot of black women in terms of getting them on platforms. And I think sometimes it's not about your voice, sometimes it's about the action, honestly, because that does wonders, like crazy wonders. And I would promote more people to use their network and their like knowledge and their skill set to do things and not feel pressured to always have to speak up. Yeah.
I just want to very much co-sign what's just been said, and in answer to the question that was asked, I feel like everyone on this planet is an agent of change. So whether you're doing that at home, at work, with your kids, the way in which you interact with people, I just feel like everyone stands for something, and as long as you identify what that is and you vocalize it, that is feminism. That's what it means to me, just sharing your story and allowing people to be able to understand your reality and the issues that you face. So you don't have to... There are different ways to express these things, different measures, but, you know, as simple as having a conversation with someone in a shop, as simple as having a conversation with a little girl, her watching you put on your lip gloss, like that means something to her. It's telling a story. Be expressive with who you are and allow your, whatever you are, to be an embodiment of, you know, your realities, essentially.
Can I just go back to her point in terms of like, and your point of how do you use your voice, or how just a little person in the corner? It's like a football team. Not everyone has the same role. You can actually basically play different roles and create change, and everyone's doesn't have to be the striker. Do you get what I'm saying? And I think it's that understanding, and going back to what I'm saying, when I said I wanted to create a movement, I just wanted different people to come in and play different roles. And, you know, not everyone is going to be there and be like, yo, like be in people's faces. But it's that understanding, it's that togetherness, it's that basically domino effect, yo, like if you're going to do that, I'm going to do that. I'm going to pass the ball, you're going to pass the ball. And that's what I would like to educate women about. yo, like that togetherness, like how can we become a team that basically passes around that ball? We ain't done that yet. Everyone's trying to strike.
Carla, thank you so much. We've just got time for one last question. Hi. A statement.
Yeah, so my name's Priscilla, and I run an organisation called Broken Smiles. So it's initiated like to help individuals that are going through personal battles, and like I hold events covering a variety of topics like touching onto mental health. So it's like I have a panel and an audience, and what we do is like we touch onto sensitive subjects that people wouldn't really want to speak about on a day-to-day basis. And with me, the reason why I started that organisation, because I suffered from postnatal depression. So after having my son, I literally shut myself away from the world. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to talk to anyone. And I felt like, because of my experience, I felt like I needed to make that change. I wanted for people to understand that whatever you go through in life, there's always someone that you can relate to. So it's like, if you have a panel with people, at least if there's even 20, for me, it's like an accomplishment if 5 people can walk away and feel like, do you know what, I heard her, and do you know what I mean? And educate yourself basically on what to do next. So, yeah.
Yeah, speaking about educating, I think every single person, going back to your really, really valid question about, you know, where do you start? There are so many issues. Is it selfish of me to prioritise myself? It is selfish because, again, I was speaking earlier about how we have to make the effort to learn about the experiences of those who don't look like us. So now that we have the internet, and now that, you know, you've asked that question, take action in your own way. So you don't have to, like Carla said, you know, be the striker. Your way of creating that change can be to actually learn about that person's experience, because you will eventually meet someone like that. And when they meet you, they will feel so safe, and they will feel like they will just feel so overjoyed to know that someone gets them. And that is so important. Feeling understood feels just as great as being loved.
Right.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, of course, Nathaniel, please.
Really quickly talking about allyship. To be a good ally, you don't have to say to someone, oh, I wish I was black too so I could understand racism. It's just about understanding what they're going through. And that's what you should do when you educate yourself. So be a good ally.
Yeah, I was going to say final words. Do you want them to be your final words, or do you want to add some more final words? That's fine if you want.
If you're a man and you listen to Mojo's story in particular, I think, and you didn't feel anything, you need to take a deep look at yourself and why you didn't feel anything. If you did feel something, then think about what you can do to stop things like that happening, because they happen every day. So as a man, what can you do to make other men better? That's my point.
Anna, how about you?
Just thinking about everything that's been said, I think actually for me to be kinder to other women, because I don't actually feel like it's our job personally. I feel like men have more power, women are pitted against each other. We've got a lot of work to do, so we don't see each other as competitors the whole time. And I think men need to have a little bit more culpability in this situation while we try and dismantle all that the patriarchy has put on us since we were born. So that's my last words.
We've got 2 minutes left.
I think my last words are just simply to just try your best to understand that nothing anybody ever does is ultimately because of you, but also understanding that, like, for me, I've learnt to just not be angry at women who are rejecting their own emancipation. I'm like, you know what, you're still under the system of misogyny, and when you're ready, I'm here. But also, I'm learning as well that it doesn't have to be your battle to fight. You don't have to fight every single battle. You can choose to tap out. Like, it's okay to tap out. It's okay to decide, you know what, today I don't want to deal with this, and I don't have to. It's okay to do that. So I think just making sure to not carry it on your head, because it will consume you, and one person cannot take down a system that's been here for centuries.
Carla, what about you?
Last words are, you know, women, just try and work together, be serious about your thing, have a vision and actually execute and go for it. And I wouldn't basically, a lot of the conversation's been about how men's behaviour can change. I think we need to address our behaviour, have a goal, have a vision for ourselves and go for it.
Thank you so much to our panel and to our audience and everyone listening at home. It has been amazing. Reece, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Can we make some noise to Yasmin, please?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And Reece, come on. And Reece, come on. Yeah.
Hear her. Hear her.